and welcome to another Lawn Fawn video. Today we are so excited to be introducing our dies Stitched Wavy Backdrop Portrait and Stitched Wavy Backdrop Landscape. These backdrop dies are awesome because they cut a standard size card base at 5.5 by 4.25, and they have these really cool waving designs that are really fun to tuck different critters inside. So let's take a look. Here's a look at the landscape version of the Stitched Wavy Backdrop. I love that it has the stitch detail all the way around the edges, and then it's got those awesome waves in different sizes. And then here is a look at the portrait version, which also has the stitch detail around the edges and those awesome little wavy designs. Now this is what it looks like to take critters and kind of tuck them into these wavy looks. And one of my favorite things to do is to use the critters from Really High Five because it looks like they're swimming and it looks absolutely adorable. In this video, we're going to show you a couple of different ways to use these dies, some ocean ways and a non-ocean way too, different ways to tuck critters and different elements inside of these waves, and also how to use the waves just as a really cool texture in the background of a card. So let's go ahead and do some awesome card making.
For my stitched wavy backdrop landscape, I'm going to create a little scene with some swimming critters. I'm using that little fox from On the Beach. The bear and the mouse are from Really High Five. And then I also have some beach balls. But before I die cut my background piece, that is the setting for this scene, I'm going to do some ink blending on it. So I have a piece of white Bristol cardstock. This is cut a little bit bigger than my background die is going to cut. That way I don't have to worry about lining up the edges. I'm starting out with some cracked pistachio distress oxide ink. This is the lightest color, so I've got that along one side. And then I'm going in with some peacock feathers. This is going to be my darkest color, so I'm just putting a layer of this all along the bottom side. And then I'm going to pull in my midtone, which is Salvage Patina. And I'm just going to add that to that white area in the center. And I'm using a piece of scrap paper just to protect my inked piece from fingerprints from my fingers. Once I've got that Salvage Patina on there, I can start to go back and forth between my colors and blend out that harsh line between them. So I'm pulling that Salvage Patina up into my cracked pistachio a little bit more, and then I'm going to turn this around and use my cracked pistachio to blend out the line between the two. Now I'm going to add a lot of texture to this background. So I'm starting out with some clean water, and I've just sprayed it all over. Since this is Distress Oxide ink, it's going to oxidize with the water, but I'm also picking up those water droplets with a paper towel so that I get some lighter areas and I get some texture. Next, I'm going to go in and add some watercolor splatters. I'm starting out with white to add some lighter areas, and then I'm going to go in with black and add some really fine splatters. I don't want big black splatters, so I'm flicking this off the edge of an acrylic block so I get some really fine black dots. And then finally, I want some splatters that are going to catch the light and shimmer and shine like the water does in the bright sunshine, so I'm adding some white metallic splatters. And once all that is dry, I can die cut this piece out with my Stitched Wavy Landscape backdrop. So now that I have my waves cut, I can start to arrange my images. This bear and the mouse are from Really High Five, and they're jumping up, but when you lay them on their side like this, they look like they're doing the backstroke, which is really fun. And then, of course, the fox from On the Beach is laying out in the sun, so he just looks like he's floating in the waves. I'm stamping my sentiment to the right side of a little banner that says "Just floating by" to say that's going to go at the top of my card. And then I'm going to do the same thing to the left side of a banner that says "Have a relaxing day." So this is going to go in the bottom right corner, and the other one's going to go in the top left. And I'll just trim off that white piece that's going to overhang the side. So I'm adding some liquid glue to the back of my die cut piece, and I made sure to add it above all the waves so that I basically create a pocket below the waves, because I want to still be able to tuck all these little critters under the waves. And I'm just going to add liquid glue to all these as I tuck them underneath. So since they're being tucked in there, they're not going to have any foam or any dimension to them. Everything's going to be pretty flat on this card. But I just like that they look like they're floating in those waves or going for a swim. So I've got my bear, my fox, and then my cute little mouse. And then I'm going to add some embellishments around them as well. But first I'm going to add my sentiment strip along the bottom. And then the part that is overhanging off the card, I'm just going to trim off. So I really do like this look. It kind of gives you some movement of a sentiment at the top left and continuing on to the bottom right. And it just gives you a different look to have those banners that you trim off as well. So I have 2 beach balls. The little one is from the Pool Party stamp set, and this large one is from On the Beach. And I just colored those in rainbow colors. I think they add a lot of nice color to this card. We have some warm colors in there, which is sort of missing with all that blue ink blending. And then I have some little splashes as well. So I'll just add those little splashes around so we have some movement in this card. Then finally, I'm going to add some glitter to the splashes and to some portions of those stitched waves. So we have that glitter that catches your eye. And here is my finished card with those critters having a really fun time swimming in those blue waves. The card I'm making is using the wavy background in the portrait orientation, and I'm going to use a piece of Bristol cardstock and ink it up before I cut it. So I'm inking it up with some tea dye Distress Oxide ink across the whole piece. And then I'm going to die cut and do more inking across the tops of the hills. So I just wanted this piece to be completely layered up with this, so that I'm basically starting with a tea dye colored piece of paper. So I'm just putting an even coat of this ink all over. And then once I have everything colored, I can die cut this with that stitched wavy backdrop portrait die. So this piece of cardstock that I colored is just slightly bigger. And now that I have it cut out, I'm going to ink each of these hills. So I'm getting out my ruler to measure the distance between the 2 edges so that I can trim down a piece of scrap paper just to tuck behind each little wave so that I can mask off the wave above it. So you can see how that's just going to fit right into the slot that the die creates for each wave. And that's going to protect the one above it from my darker browns. So I have Vintage Photo, and I also have Ground Coffee. And I'm going to add darkness to the top of each of these. I'm making a garden with some veggies in it. So I'm going to make this look like a nice, fertile garden with all this dark dirt for my veggies to grow in. So I'm starting out with the Vintage Photo. Again, these are all Distress Oxides. So you get that really chalky, thick color. And then that is Ground Coffee. And then I'll just go back and forth between them to get a nice blend, and then pull in that tea dye again to blend out between them. So I'm going to repeat this process for every one of these little waves, making my little rows for my veggies in the garden. And I've added the little post-it note tape to protect the edge where it's still connected so that my dark colors don't bleed up into the hill right above, because the paper isn't on that edge, so that tape helps protect it all the way across. So just starting with that Vintage Photo, the Ground Coffee, and the tea dye, working back and forth till I get nice smooth. I'm going to speed this way up so that you can see how all these get colored with the ink blending as I work my way up my little panel. You can see how that really changes the look of this wavy background die. And I did kind of pull it a little bit, but it's easy to just hold back in place with some tape. And now I'm going to add some texture to my garden. I'm adding some white watercolor splatters, and then I'm going to dry those and add some dark brown watercolor splatters on top. So I have a light color and a darker color, and it gives a really nice texture to the dirt that my veggies are going to grow in. So the images for this card come from the Rooting for You stamp set, which is an older stamp set with these really fun layering solid stamps. I'm going to be stamping out 3 of each vegetable. I'm starting out with the carrot, so I stamped that solid piece in carrot ink. Then I'm going to stamp the little line details in fake tan, and I'm actually going to stamp it twice so they're nice and dark. Each of these also has a topper. There's a solid stamp for each topper, and then there's also a detail piece with some little lines for each topper. Now I'm moving on to the radishes, and the toppers for the radishes are these fun little leaves. They also have some little line details, and I'm just using various green inks for this. Now for the turnips, I'm using the butter ink, which is this really light yellow, and it gives you sort of that creamy look. For the details on this one, I'm using purple, it's fresh lavender. And then while I have that fresh lavender out, I'm going to go ahead and stamp out the beets. So I'm using the fresh lavender for the body of the beet, and then juice box for the details. Now I'm moving on to the tops of each of these. I'm using a darker green for these radishes. Then I'm going to go in with Noble Fir, which is that darkest green for the details. And then I've got the tops of the turnips. And I'm using cilantro ink for that. And then there's details for that as well that I'm also going to use Noble Fir ink on. So I've got them all stamped out. Now I can add the cute little faces that come in this set, and there's a couple of them. So I'm just going to stamp out a variety of faces on all my veggies so they're all a little different. So I'm just taking each one, and then I'm picking 2 vegetables and stamping 2 of them. And this is just going to give me a nice variety in all the little faces of my cute little veggies. Now there's also the little tag in the set, the sign that goes in the garden to tell you what the veggies are. I stamped all of those out in kiddie pool ink, and now I'm just stamping the names of the veggies right on top. So I'm not going to use that gray one you see there. That's where I started, but I felt like it was a little too dark, so I went with that lighter blue color. And now I've cut everything out with the coordinating dies, and I'll just start to assemble all my vegetables. So I'm going to go ahead and put all the tops on all my veggies. So here is some really fast veggie assembly. And it just takes a little dab of some liquid glue at the bottom of the leafy parts to glue all these together quickly. So once I have all of these together, I can start to arrange my garden. So I'm going to pull out my wavy backdrop I made earlier, and I'm going to start tucking these behind the hills and figuring out where I want my veggies. As you can see, I'm not going to use all 3 for all of them. I only use 2 of the turnips and 2 of the beets, and I'm actually going to use the extra ones that I'm not putting on the front on the inside of the card, which you'll see at the end. And then once I've figured out the placement of all their little signs and the veggies, I can start to glue them all down into place using my liquid glue. So one of the nice things about doing this before you put all of this onto a card base is there's no glue behind it, and you can tuck those veggies as far down behind the little hills that you need. And I really think this is another fun way to use this background die. It is waves, but it also works great as dirt and hills. So once I have all my veggies on there, I'm going to heat emboss a sentiment on the bottom. I could have done this previously, but it really doesn't matter which order you do this in. I'm just going to use my MISTI so that I don't make any mistakes. So I used my powder tool, my anti-static powder tool. I'm lining up the sentiment along the bottom. The sentiment is also from the Rooting for You stamp set, and I'm black embossing this. And when I black emboss, I like to use some VersaFine ink, which is a black pigment ink, and then I just use clear embossing powder over top of that. And this will give me a nice shiny sentiment. And I'm doing this because I put oxide ink on this background, and sometimes when I stamp on oxide ink, to me it looks a little chalky, and this just really makes that sentiment stand out. Now I can glue this whole piece that's put all together onto a card base, and I decided to go with a craft card base because I thought that went really well with the colors of this garden. So I'm just making sure that's glued down really well on all the sides and underneath. And then there's my 2 extra veggies that I didn't end up using on the front. And I'm just going to add those to the inside of my card. I think they're going to look super cute. It's kind of a fun thing to open it up and see those little veggies inside. It's just like an extra little surprise on the inside of your card. And then here is my finished stitched wavy backdrop portrait card, a little garden using the Rooting for You stamp set, and I just think this is adorable.
I am just in love with this card, Shari. It is so adorable and sweet, and I love that you took waves and turned them into dirt. So clever and so cool. And then I love the ocean card you made. I just love that it looks like these critters are swimming in a pool. It's so much fun. And now I'm going to start working on a card that uses this backdrop just as a backdrop, and you'll see what I mean in a second. So here's the stitched wavy backdrop and portrait, and we're going to die cut some Spiffy Speckles paper, which already gives it a fun ocean look because it has all of those little speckles all over it. And then we're also going to be die cutting the largest of the stitched rectangles, and this is a perfect match for any backdrop die, and it looks so cool, giving it a nice little frame. We also have a standard size card base that's 5.5 by 4.25. So we're going to add some tape runner to the back of this whole backdrop piece, and we're going to layer that onto the card base, and then we're going to layer the frame on top of that. And I love this look, and it's such a fun way to get a little bit of a different look out of different types of backdrop dies by layering over this stitched rectangle frame. Next up, we are going to do a fun mix and match of a ton of different stamp sets, and we are recreating a card by Elena right now, and this card was so clever, and I just love how she mixed and matched so many things. So those inner tubes there, those are from the new Pool Party stamp set, but then we took the mermaids from Mermaid for You and the Mermaid for You Flip Flop, which are older stamp sets, and we're going to use them on the inner tubes. So I love that the inner tubes are so cute with the critters included in Pool Party, but how fun is it to use the inner tubes with other stamped characters that you already have, and the mermaids on the inner tubes, I don't know why it is, but it just makes me smile. So now we've layered the mermaids on top of the inner tubes from Pool Party, and we're going to add some foam squares on the back of that. Now for other images from this, we also used On the Beach and also Bubbles of Joy and Scripty Bubble Sentiments. So the bubbles are great for things like blowing bubbles, in the summer and springtime, but I love the idea of using these bubble things for ocean stuff. It really gives you a fun way to use the bubble idea in a little bit of a different look. Now we're going to add some foam squares behind the Scripty Bubble sentiment that says smile. And I just love the idea of these bubbles now being in the ocean. It's so cute and so much fun. So we're going to layer that smile in there, and then we can start to actually add the mermaids. We were kind of using the mermaids as a bit of a guide there. So we're going to add some foam squares on the mermaids and then have them floating in this ocean. So now instead of tucking things into the Stitch Wavy backdrop, we're just using it as a really cool texture behind our mermaid scene. So there's lots of cool and fun ways to use this die, and at the end of the video I'm going to show you a bunch of incredible cards by the design team. So now we're going to add some fish from the Mermaid for You stamp set and some bubbles from Bubbles of Joy, which look so cute around there and just kind of help fill in the card and fill in the scene. And then we'll add a few more bubbles here and there. And then last but not least, we're going to take the sunscreen. That's from On the Beach. And we're going to give that to one of the mermaids too, which is really cute. It's really fun that they each have like their own little accessory, bubbles, a seashell, and some sunscreen. And so this is a cute, quick and easy card and a really fun way to use an older stamp set with something brand new to make it different and happy and fun. And next up, we have some incredible cards by the design team. And we are starting up with the cutest card by Elise. I love how she used the word waving and had it kind of going in a wave. So clever and fun. Callie created both a portrait and landscape version of this card, and I love that she colored and inked the bottom part of the wavy backdrop to be sand and the top part to be the ocean. This is such a cute scene, and I love the pool party set combined with on the beach. This card here by Tammy is so sweet, and I love how she ink blended that backdrop to create a really incredible backdrop with a ton of texture. This card by Megan is adorable, and I love that she used the sun ray stencil at the very top part of the stitched wavy backdrop to be that beautiful sun in the background. I love how Kara tucked the flamingo floaty into one of those waves and then layered those cute little mice all of the way around. This card is just so sweet and fun. I love how Grace layered the tropical backdrop over this stitched wavy backdrop. The two are a perfect match together, and I just love that layered look. And then this is the card by Elena that inspired us to make our card today. It's so cute and sweet. I just love it. This card by Maureen is amazing. She used smooth sailing and some tiny threads to create such an amazing, beautiful, watery scene. And then here, I love how Audrey added our new mermaid to this beautiful stitched wavy backdrop. It adds the perfect texture for the background of her card. This scene by Lynette is so much fun. I love how she just used the very bottom of the stitched wavy backdrop and then layered over a beautiful stenciled background. And here I love how Mindy tucked all of those cute characters into the wavy scene and then added a little sand for the bottom of her ocean. So we cannot wait to see how you guys use these backdrop dies, so make sure to share it with us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye!